Destiny 2 is a very in-depth game when it comes to its sandbox and every little interaction that sprouts from within it. Certain exotics have hidden synergies not stated anywhere, certain abilities feature bonus perks that are never mentioned, and various aspects and fragments work in ways you'd never expect. And sometimes these unique interactions lead to some cool gameplay moments, but more often than not they are just really good to be aware of. So today I present you 25 more unique interactions in Destiny 2 that you probably never knew. And if you want to watch the first entry in this series, then feel free to click the card in the top right to get yourself caught up. And if you end up enjoying today's content, then a like and subscribe is greatly appreciated. So without further ado, let's begin. Quicksilver Storm is the only weapon in the game whose catalyst effect changes the elemental affinity of the weapon. Applying it makes it go from kinetic to strand. However, in doing so, the weapon actually becomes worse, kinda. You see, kinetic primary weapons deal an intrinsic 10% increased damage to all enemies when compared to their elemental counterparts. And as you can see, my kinetic Quicksilver Storm deals 47 damage to the head, however the strand version deals slightly less at 43. Not a total game changer, but a good way to highlight that the kinetic damage boost is still very much a thing. If you'd like to get your own kinetic Quicksilver Storm, any copies you pull from collections won't have the catalyst applied by default and all drop as kinetic. Slayer's Fang is a void exotic shotgun that has the main trait Nightsworn Sight, which is activated by scoring kills with the weapon. This perk allows subsequent kills to grant true sight, reload speed bonuses, increased precision damage, and allows the weapon's submunitions to weaken targets. But did you know that getting kills isn't the only way to trigger Nightsworn Sight? In fact, there are two more hidden ways to do so. Firstly, collecting a Void Breach activates Nightsworn Sight, which by the way isn't stated anywhere on the perk description. And second, if a teammate using Slayer's Fang gets a kill near you while you yourself also have the weapon equipped, you will then gain Nightsworn Sight once again. Pretty cool. Furthermore, you may not know this, but Slayer's Fang deals 10% increased damage to fallen and scorn enemies. The solar exotic sidearm Devil's Ruin has the secondary trait Pyrogenesis, which states that solar laser scorches targets hit and ignites them when defeated. However, this isn't the only way to score some ignitions with this weapon. In fact, defeating any suspended target also causes an ignition, and it also doesn't have to be with the laser. Just the regular firing mode will cause an ignition upon defeating any suspended target, which isn't listed anywhere on the description of the perks. Definitely keep in mind for any suspend builds you're using, especially when it comes to the new Warlock exotic from Renegades. That thing sounds awesome for suspend synergy. Before the Edge of Fate, becoming amplified granted you plus 50 to your mobility stat, something which we covered in our previous 25 interactions video. But now that mobility is no longer a stat tied to armor and is instead hidden in the background, does this still work? Well, I'm pleased to inform you that yes, it does, because at base my Titan has 30 mobility, and becoming amplified lets me reach the end of the firing range slightly faster when walking than when I'm not amplified. So yes, becoming amplified does still grant plus 50 to your hidden mobility stat, which by the way is exactly equivalent to 3 enhanced athletics mods on your boots. Ergo Sum's exotic catalyst makes it so dealing damage with a transcendent grenade grants Ergo Sum ammo from thin air. Plus, it also increases the damage of your sword by 44% while transcendent. But did you know that any sword damage dealt while transcendent counts for the increased prismatic grenade regeneration speed you get from dealing melee damage? Yup, just a simple light swing combo continually boosts the regen rate of your prismatic grenade as if it was a melee ability dealing damage instead, which does pair pretty nicely with the catalyst. Speaker's Sight is a Warlock exotic helmet that converts your healing grenades into autonomous healing turrets, which also works when consuming your healing grenade while the Heat Rises aspect is equipped. However, did you know that consuming the Wisp grenade during your Song of Flame super also leaves behind a healing turret, letting you spawn quite a few of them over the duration of the super? This isn't a terribly impactful interaction, but I never see it mentioned, so I thought it would be cool to share. Whisper of Reversal is a stasis fragment that states while you have frost armor, melee damage slows your target. And yep, it does work as intended. Each default punch applies 10 slow stacks according to the compendium, but did you know that it also allows you to slow your teammates? Yup, while you have frost armor and this fragment equipped, punching your teammates continually applies slow stacks to them, letting you do a little bit of light trolling. Do with this information what you will, and remember, you didn't hear it from me.
Try running.
I can't. No.
Oh, did that cleanse you? No.
Oh, no, you're good now. My frost armor ran out. Staying with stasis for the next interaction, did you know that the description for Whisper of Impetus has been wrong since it released? Whisper of Impetus states that damaging targets with a stasis melee reloads your stowed weapons and grants you a temporary boost to weapon ready speed. However, the reload portion not only applies to your stowed weapons, but whichever you also have currently equipped, reloading it as well. Next is a pretty neat interaction for any avid tractor cannon users, and it concerns two specific fragments, the Void Echo of Domineering and the Prismatic Facet of Command, because both of these have a description that states suppressing a target reloads your equipped weapon, and because Tractor Cannon applies void suppression with each and every shot, dealing damage with it will always reload it to full, making sure you never have to worry about reloading. Furthermore, because Tractor Cannon applies both suppression and its own specialized version of Weaken, any weapons that feature the new Aggregate Charge perk will be instantly granted 2 stacks of the buff, since both the Weaken and Suppress count as 2 separate debuffs. Next is a rather nice interaction concerning the Blessing of the Sky buff granted either by Lumina or Boots of the Assembler, wherefore whenever you have this buff active, yes, your weapon damage is increased by 35%, but also the buff itself grants you plus 100 to your class stat. I know, so strange, but as you can see, using my class ability with around 90 class grants me no overshield whatsoever, but upon gaining Blessing of the Sky, using my class ability gives me almost a full class overshield, which by the way is the exact effect you get for investing upwards of 100 class stat. This next one is to do with how healing effects are coded in the game, and that is to say, some healing is technically coded as negative damage taken and can thus activate a selection of perks that require receiving damage to function, such as during episode Heresy, where we had the No Bell artifact perk that made it so blocking with a glaive increased glaive melee damage, and this worked while blocking within a Well of Radiance, because the healing from Well counted as negative damage taken, making those Rite of the Nine Ekthar 1 phases just that much more efficient. Please bring back Rite of the Nine Ghost of the Deep, Bungie. Next is a bit of a silly one, and it concerns the Felwinter's Helm exotic helmet for the Warlock, which allows your finishers to create weakening pulses in a relatively wide AoE depending on the rank of the enemy you finish, and the actual origin of the weakening pulse comes from the location of the dead body you just finished, meaning that if you finish an enemy with the Give 'em the Chair finisher that launches their corpse flying into the distance, the weakening pulse follows them and detonates wherever they end up, which is actually the basis of how Warlock players are able to complete the Witness encounter solo, by first finishing a chieftain into the Witness itself and later extending the debuff with Withering Gaze. Pretty funny if you ask me. New Land Beyond is an exotic bolt-action sniper rifle that's the reprised version of No Land Beyond from Destiny 1, and in that game, players could perform a special sprint cancelling technique to shoot the weapon faster, which bypassed the lengthy rechambering animation. And actually, you can still do this in Destiny 2, and yes, it is intended, though not listed on the actual description of the weapon. To do this tech in Destiny 2, simply sprint forwards whenever you see your character pull back the firing mechanism on the weapon itself. It will result in you shooting the weapon considerably faster than if you just let the animation play out in full. Just a cool tech to be aware of. Necrotic Grips are a pair of Warlock exotic gauntlets that allow your melee damage to apply poison, and there are also several other exotics, notably the Weapons of Sorrow like Thorn, Osteostriga, or Necrochasm, that also apply the same necrotic poison. And did you know that this poison effect is technically coded as kinetic damage, meaning that it works with the brand new TechSec armor set bonus. For example, the 2-piece Wrecker bonus states that you deal significantly increased kinetic damage to combatant shields, overshields, vehicles, and constructs. And yes, this does work with the necrotic poison, making it noticeably more potent at removing enemy shields. And the 4-piece Concussive Rounds bonus, which states that defeating powerful combatants or breaking a combatant shield with kinetic damage releases a disorienting kinetic shockwave, also works, where as you can see here, it sets off a rather satisfying chain reaction. Very cool interaction, which I'm sure will see some use, especially since Osteostriga is getting a slight buff inside of Renegades. This next interaction is actually fairly new, and it concerns the Wolfsbane exotic sword and Outbreak Perfected. Outbreak Perfected continually infects your target with Siva nanites the longer you fire at them, and I believe the maximum nanite stacks are around 100, but it takes a good while to get there. Anyway, because Wolfsbane is also a nanite-based weapon with its own nanite perks, it actually has a unique interaction with Outbreak, where any target that is infected with Siva nanites from Outbreak will take more damage from Wolfsbane. And at maximum nanite stacks, this damage bonus is equivalent to 25%, which is pretty cool. Furthermore, damaging targets affected with Siva nanites with Wolfsbane also builds the nano assault meter faster by a medium amount. That said though, this interaction as a whole is not terribly useful since it requires 2 of your fireteam members to use 2 very specialized exotics. However, in Renegades, Wolfsbane is receiving a pretty decent recent damage buff, so who knows, perhaps we're just on the edge of a sword damage meta revolution, only time will tell. Whirling Ovation is the raid exotic rocket launcher from the Desert Perpetual, and it's a rather unique exotic because despite it being a strand rocket launcher, the delayed explosion it produces is actually solar, where the initial impact is still strand, meaning that you can optimize the damage it deals with a clever setup using Sanguine Alchemy. While standing in any rift or well of radiance, Sanguine Alchemy grants you ×4 weapon surge that matches your super element, which for a well of radiance would be solar, so you get ×4 solar surge from that. Then your boots can be fitted with 3 strand surges to boost the strand part of the rocket, taking our initial rocket damage of 6,324 to around 9,759, an overall 54% damage increase, and if you factor well out, then the combo of ×4 solar surge and ×3 strand surge amounts to a 23.5% damage increase from our surge split, which is overall a better way of optimizing the damage of each half of the rocket. And side note, to my surprise, this rocket is actually pretty strong with the right damage setup. Expect a DPS video on this soon. The exotic heavy trace rifle Microcosm has the unique intrinsic paracausal beam, which states that it fires a beam of kinetic light, dealing massive bonus damage to shields. And yeah, it's pretty good for removing enemy shields, and actually it's a 400% or 5x increase to enemy shields, but did you know that this percentage actually stacks with the bonus received from the 2-piece TechSec armor? Yup, the 200% increased kinetic damage versus shields from the 2-piece TechSec armor is multiplied with the 400% from Microcosm, amounting to a total 1600% or 15 times bonus damage to enemy shields when you have both effects active, essentially making these shields non-existent. And yeah, this isn't exactly meta, but it's pretty cool seeing the shields of ultimate combatants be ripped off in just 2 taps. Leave a comment if you can think of any places where this might actually be useful. This next one is a little bit odd and random, but the Tessellation exotic fusion rifle changes its element depending on the element of your equipped grenade. So if I had a strand grenade equipped, Tessellation would also be strand, then solar for a solar grenade, and so on. However, if you're a hunter and you are wearing the Mothkeeper's Wraps exotic gauntlets, your Tessellation will be locked to arc affinity no matter what, likely because the moth grenades are coded as arc and override whatever your currently equipped grenade is. So sorry for the 5 hunters who use Tessellation and Mothkeepers. Hierarchy of Needs received a change in the Age of Fate expansion where now any bows that are fired through the guidance rings created by the weapon also gain the guidance projectiles. But did you know that this literally works for all bows in every sense of the theme? Buried Bloodline, despite not being a bow and actually a rocket sidearm, does resemble a mini crossbow in its design, and thus gains guidance projectiles when fired through the ring. And same goes for both Shadow Shot super variants Deadfall and Mobius Quiver. They are both a bow and arrow super after all. So yeah, why not give them the guidance projectiles? This becomes even weirder, especially with regards to Buried Bloodline, because it doesn't get buffed by the artifact perk Argent Quiver, though it does count as a bow, inverted commas, for hierarchy. So yeah, pretty weird interaction here. Coming in at number 20 is the true damage difference between a 100 melee consecration and a 200 melee consecration, which is actually nowhere near as significant as you might think. You see, the majority of the damage from consecration comes from the ignition it causes. In fact, it's roughly equivalent to 57% of the melee's damage. And because ignitions aren't buffed by melee damage scalars anymore, such as the one from the melee stat, going above 100 melee specifically for consecration isn't necessarily worth it. At 100 melee, my consecration deals 1,196 damage, then at 200 it now deals 1,345, which is only a 12.5% increase, not the 30% that is advertised for achieving 200 melee stat. So because it takes considerable investment in the melee stat to reach 200 in the first place, the fact that your investment isn't even fully reflected in the damage you deal, at least to me, makes it totally not worth it. And in my opinion, for any consecration builds, you should never go above 100 melee because it simply isn't worth it. Next, back in Destiny 1, activating the Titan Ward of Dawn, or Bubble Super as it's more commonly known, completely refunded your grenade charge. And the same is also true in Destiny 2, where popping your bubble fully refunds a single grenade charge, which is pretty useful to know, especially since a bubble buff is very likely on the horizon for renegades. Sticking with Titan, did you know that the Hammer of Soul Super actually benefits from the knockout aspect? It's true, normally a single point blank hammer deals roughly 1,295 damage, but if I proc knockout beforehand, this gets raised to 2,786. Don't ask me why this works, but it's probably because the hammers are in some way coded as melee damage, and therefore knockout boosts the damage of them. Definitely not practical, but cool to know regardless. This next one is for any newer players out there, and it concerns holster mods on your boots. Holster mods do not work for weapons with magazine sizes that are exactly 1. Most notably, breach grenade launchers, where after firing, no matter how long I leave my weapon stowed, the holster mod will not reload it, except for one weapon which has been given special treatment for this interaction, and that is the exotic heavy grenade launcher Parasite. With a solar holster mod, firing Parasite and stowing it briefly will allow it to be successfully reloaded. And as far as rotations go, the rhythm is a little weird, where take Mint for example, you first fire your initial Parasite, shoot 3 shots of Mint, then back to Parasite, then 2 shots of Mint, then back to Parasite, then 2 shots, then repeat. It's only the initial shot that takes a little extra time to reload for some reason, but after that, it's slightly more lenient. Great for Parasite DPS rotations. New Malpais is the second ever rocket-assisted pulse rifle to be released, and unfortunately, it doesn't actually count as a source of micro-missile damage, meaning it cannot trigger micro-missile synergies like the kinetic shockwave from energy acceleration, or the ion renewal or ion adapter set bonus perks. So just be aware that despite being a rocket pulse, it doesn't count for anything micro-missile related. Finally, our last entry concerns this season's artifact perk Energy Acceleration, which states that sustained damage with micro-missiles causes the combatant to emit a kinetic shockwave that damages nearby combatants. But did you know that this artifact perk also allows said shockwaves to stun unstoppable champions? Yup, the shockwave does indeed trigger the stun, and the reason for this is because Energy Acceleration is secretly a copy-paste of an older artifact perk from episode Revenant called Kinetic Impacts, which instead allowed heavy grenade launchers to emit the same shockwave, but in this case it was also explicitly stated that the shockwave stunned unstoppable champions, which also means your Mint Retrograde is now able to deal with both barrier and unstoppable champions, which is pretty insane. So there we have it. That's 25 more unique interactions in Destiny 2 that you probably never knew. Leave a comment down below if you can think of any other interactions you found in your time playing, or if you already knew a bunch of these. I'm very curious to know. Anyway, I do hope you enjoyed, and thank you very much for watching. Just to let you know, I also stream regularly on Twitch at twitch.tv/lamad2 if you want to catch me live and enjoy some good vibes. Plus, there's also some pretty cool Twitch drops available right now during the Call to Arms event. But that's all I've got for today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now, dear viewer.